Right. So, welcome everyone. It's great to see you. And gosh, a special shout out to, I hope this is okay, but so good to see you, Holly, um, from my Santa Cruz Sangha. Um, so, tonight I wanted to talk about Sila, the Pali word often translated as ethics. And I've been doing this deep dive into ethics, into Sila, for the last few months. And I've been sort of freshly inspired by the ways in which the idea of ethics, values and behavior that are aligned with integrity, with wholesomeness and kindness and compassion, how it really implies that we're related to each other, that our relationality, our relations, our interrelatedness is just of utmost importance to living full and connected lives. I'm really struck by this because meditation practice itself can often sort of embody a sort of solitary way of being. When we sit, we don't speak, we don't interact with others. It's a kind of taking care of our own minds, our hearts, our bodies. But there's this whole other aspect of the Dharma that's about being in the world and in relationship, and in relationship to each other and to ourselves. And this notion of, if we are cultivating in our inner state, in our practice, in our meditation practice, this heart that is full of love and of compassion, then the outer manifestation of that is a kind of care and connectedness, which comes down to ethics, which comes down to living a life that has integrity, and that values others. But these are both, the inner state and the outer state, they're both aspects of this same radiance. And it's really off the cushion that we can experience the ways in which this practice transforms us and engenders these ways of being in the world that are kind and compassionate and generous and loving. So deeply important also to these times of so much polarization. So the Buddha actually began his teachings with Sila, by teaching people to be generous, to be careful about their actions. And he actually taught that ethical conduct is a necessary foundation of liberation. And this is the question that I've been asking myself and exploring is why and how is this? Why is ethical or moral conduct essential to freedom? And I wanted to kind of explore this with you and speak to this question through a story from the Jataka Tales. The Jataka Tales are a collection of stories, kind of fables in the Pali literature. And there's one about a king who was offering half of his kingdom and the hand of his daughter, of course, because women are property back in those days, to someone who would steal something without anyone finding out about it. So all of these, young men came to the castle with these items that they had stolen, swords and vases and relics and this and that, and were very proud of themselves that no one had seen them steal it or even knew that they had stolen it. And the king just kept dismissing them one after one until one man came who had nothing. And when the king asked him why he had brought nothing, he said, well, I can't steal anything because um, I would know about it. There's no way that someone can steal something without anyone knowing about it because that very person would know about it. And this knowing is um, this knowing of our own lack of integrity in a moment is what disconnects us from each other. And the king knew, he actually, of course, the end of the tale is that he was waiting for a wise person to give his half of his kingdom to. And so he selected this person who recognized that there's no way to be out of integrity and have no one know about it. That we're planting a seed in our own heart of disharmony when we engage in harm. And we can't really feel whole within. Um, I've had, and maybe some of you can relate to this, but I've had many experiences in my life now, mostly in the past, well, all in the past, of being dishonest because I didn't want to harm someone. I wanted to protect someone from something I thought might lead to their worry or their agitation or their pain in some way. And I always found that rather than bring me closer to this other person, it actually created a rift of separation, of disharmony. It generated for me, and I'd be curious if some of you have had this experience yourselves, how you might understand it, but it generated a sense of disconnection, that way of being dishonest, slightly dishonest, actually created separation rather than connection, even though the intention was to prevent harm or to prevent worry or discomfort in the other person. And this sense of disconnection is so counter to the Buddha's description of liberation or freedom, which is that which is beyond separation. And in the case of speaking falsely, the result is actually not just the disconnection I feel from myself and from the other, but if we are dishonest, we're actually putting the other person in a position where they have to either trust me or trust themselves. I remember hearing Joseph Goldstein speak about this, that wise speech means that the other person, if they are being deceived, they have to choose to trust the person who's deceiving them or trust themselves, because on some level people can sense what's true. It doesn't feel quite right. And so that experience too, taking that choice, is also one of disconnection. It disconnects them from me or from themselves. So this is why I've been getting so excited. One reason about Sila is because it feels to me fundamental to connection, to a sense of wholeness, and it works on all levels of our relationships, to ourselves, to others, to the earth, the environments we inhabit. And while the Buddha did, in his teachings on Sila, outline a list of precepts, to help guide ethical behavior, he also taught ethics as a mindfulness practice. This mindfulness practice that invites us to really examine the intentions of our actions, the consequences of our actions, and in so doing to align ourselves with a sense of connection and of wholeness. There's a sutta that some of you might be familiar with, the Rahula Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Pali Canon, and it's a teaching that the Buddha gave to his son, Rahula, about ethics. And he reflects on the body, the speech, one's speech and mind, action through the body, through speech, and through mind. And I can, maybe I'll read a little bit. There's a lot of repetition, as some of you probably know. So he begins with the body. So Rahula, when you wish to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Would this action that I wish to do with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I wish to do with the body would lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Then you definitely should not do such an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I wish to do with the body would not lead to my own affliction, to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results, then you may do such an action with the body. And he goes through the body with before you do an action, and then while you're doing the action, you reflect. And then after you do the action, you reflect. You reflect on these same questions. Is this leading to my own affliction, or to wholesomeness? So there's these 3 moments, before doing this bodily action, during, and after. And then he goes through speech and as well as thoughts in the mind. And so this is what I love about this is it's a mindfulness practice. I mean, it's what we're training ourselves to do, is to really have that sense of discernment of what's going on in the moment, and a sincerity of practice. One thing that has troubled me about this sutta, and also about ethics in general, is that we can't always know the consequences of our actions, especially in a world where so many things, the things that I purchase, for example, when I choose to drive my car, all of these actions can have impacts on people and places and beings that I won't ever see. And so this idea of reflecting on the consequences of the action, there was a part of me that was thinking, but I can't ever know. So how do I make these decisions? And yet, when we consider this a mindfulness practice like meditation, we also can consider it as a developmental process. How we get better, we get more skilled at discerning impact, at discerning consequences. There's a deepening sensitivity. And it requires insight in the first place to even understand what is dukkha, what is suffering, and what is not suffering. So some of this discernment, some of this practice might actually be researching the direct impacts of carbon consumption or the supply chains of our purchases. And in that process, we can sense in our own systems the ways in which some actions lead to a sense of separation or contraction, and others to connection and harmony. And the sutta also reminds us that Sila is more than a list of guidelines. It's actually a way of being that's fundamentally supportive of our interrelatedness, and, as the Buddha said, of our liberation. So in the title to my talk, I think I headlined or frontlined the guardians of the world, Hiri and Ottappa, and I've now spent most of my talk not there, which is fine, but I'll touch a little bit on these guardians, which I've also found so evocative. So Hiri is often translated as an innate sense of shame over transgression. and Ottappa is a sense of moral dread. And these two elements of human experience were described by the Buddha as the safeguards of morality, the guardians of the world, as something to aspire towards and honor. So this immediately caught my attention because to me it felt a bit paradoxical that motivations or behaviors rooted, or not rooted, but influenced by fear and shame, they don't exactly appear to be liberatory. But if we explore what the Buddha is pointing to, it's actually a valuing of self and a valuing of other. And the more reading that I was doing and exploration around this, it became clear to me that it's not based fundamentally on fear, but on empathy. It's like Hiri, this sense of shame over transgression, of not wanting to do something wrong, or something that would be harmful. It connotes a respect for ourselves, that we don't want to plant the seeds of separation in our own hearts and minds, that we don't want to be people who are out of integrity. And then Ottappa, it's a valuing of that other. It's the moral dread or the fear or the concern about an action being harmful. It's a respect for others. It connotes this empathy and this connection, that we're concerned about the repercussions of our actions, because fundamentally the well-being and happiness of others matters to us. We actually care about and we value those who accompany us on this journey of life. Some of you know that I've been, except for the last 6 months or so, been living in this little yurt. And I would often have many house guests of the insect variety, near arachnids. I'd have spiders and ants and wasps and bees and sometimes little snakes, and they'd all come through the floors and the walls. And I had a practice of kind of escorting them out, which was I would sweep them up into a dustpan and deposit them outside. And I remember there was one time when I did that, and I noticed it was a stream of ants, and I noticed as I was depositing these ants outside that some of their really delicate bodies and legs had been damaged by the broom. And I saw that pain that I had caused, and there was quite a bit of regret. But from that moment, I attended to the ants and all the other critters with as much gentleness as I could, with a lot of carefulness. And in exploring the ideas of Hiri and Ottappa in my own system, in my own life, I really like to take these ideas and digest them, kind of metabolize them through my own experience. I could see how there is a bit of what could perhaps be understood or defined as that kind of moral dread. Like, I don't want to cause harm. There's a bit of a fear quality. Like, that's not something that I want to do. I want to stay away from causing harm. And that was part of my gentleness, part of my carefulness with these insects, is that I don't want fundamentally to cause harm. And that, in that sense, Ottappa in this case can really be seen as a guardian of the world, a moral conscience, a not wanting to cause harm. And those two guardians of not wanting to cause harm to ourselves, to others, valuing ourselves, valuing the other, that it enables trust. It It means that we can live in a world based on trust, where we know that others are concerned for us and we're concerned for others. So I mentioned in the beginning that the Buddha taught us that we be careful. Speaking of careful, I need to remember what time I'm supposed to end. Okay, great. Um, we're supposed to be careful with our actions. And that's another word and um, idea that I've been metabolizing through my system. What is it to be careful? And what it means is that we're full of care. I love that. That it's actually like it's a heart quality. That to be careful is to be full of care. And this sense of care is not just directed outward. We direct it inward as well. There's a word in Pali that translates in English as care. It's anukampa, and it's characterized by an absence of clinging, so an absence of needing anything to be different. And yet it comes out of a deep respect, an honoring for ourselves and for others. And it's not just it's not well, what am I? It's not just a soothing. That's the word I'm looking for. It's not just a soothing kind of care. It's actually a flourishing care. It's an abundant care. It's a I want you to thrive kind of care that's all inclusive. And Gil Fronsdale, a teacher of mine and maybe some of yours, speaks about the difference between anukampa and compassion. In that compassion is arises in the face of suffering. So it is more of a soothing. It's a care that is attending to the suffering of others. And anukampa is a care that can definitely respond to suffering, and yet it's also just a genuine care, regardless of anything that's actually happening or happened to the other person. It's a non-directional, abundant care that I think is important in one way, because if care only comes, and perhaps some of you are caregivers, are therapists, are chaplains, are mentors of some kind, if care only comes to those who are suffering, then it requires that people prove or others prove that they're suffering. But if care comes regardless of conditions or circumstance, then there's a simplicity and a generosity and an ethic of care. And the Buddha said, wander forth out of anukampa for the world, out of anukampa, out of care for the world. So, despite the ways in which individualism tends to be upheld, perhaps even glorified sometimes in American culture, we're deeply connected to one another, to humans, to non-humans, to our ancestors. When we're out of connection with others, we're out of connection with ourselves. And we can feel it. We can feel it somatically. If you imagine a time that you have been dishonest, been self-harming in some way, or have been out of integrity with another, if you just feel into that, memory for a moment. You might find attention in the body, attention in the mind, a sense of separation. And this tension, this sense of separation may be one way that we keep ourselves safe from feeling the pain of the world. But this pain of separation is much deeper, it runs much deeper. And it's more problematic than the pain that can arise from being in connection and in empathy. It's what the Buddha said was full liberation, full freedom. And the genuine kinship and the friendship that is based on this trust that we care for each other, we care for our own well-being and for others' well-being. And in acting from care, from a place of empathy and clarity, we can help others connect with their own empathy, with their own connection. Can remind each other that we are in relationship with each other. That this practice that we're engaged in, this mindfulness practice, this Buddhist practice, this practice of living full lives, living full, loving, awake lives in the world, that it's a relational practice. It's not solitary work. And that is what I am so struck by in the wisdom of the Buddha to begin his teachings with Sila, with ethics, that he's situating practice within our relations, with the relations we have and that make us who we are and what we are. So I think I'd like to end with a poem. Now I can't find my poem. Where did it go? Maybe be patient with me for just a moment while I find my poem. Okay. Guess I have to find it again. Oh, you can probably hear my computer clicking. You can use it as a little mindfulness bell. It's worth the wait, I promise you. Okay, found it. So it's a Mark Nepo poem. Paya, a clearing in the forest. We agree to meet halfway round the world, where the ocean waited thousands of years before opening its clear mouth to speak this island under the sun. All to remember we are students of the large stillness, struggling with our little stillness. Never knowing what will rise between us, we meet beyond the bamboo forest and bend in the light, hollow as these stalks, listening for a trace of the beginning as we do. Accepting this. I have thought great thoughts and sung great songs, all of it rehearsal for the majesty of being held. The dream is awakened when thinking I love you, and life begins when saying I love you, and joy moves like blood when embracing others with love. My efforts now turn from trying to outrun suffering to accepting love wherever I can find it. Stripped of causes and plans and things to strive for, I have discovered everything I could need or ask for is right here, in flawed abundance. We cannot eliminate hunger, but we can feed each other. We cannot eliminate loneliness, but we can hold each other. We cannot eliminate pain, but we can live a life of compassion. Ultimately, we are small living things awakened in the stream, not gods who carve out rivers. Like human fish, we are asked to experience meaning in the life that moves through the gill of our heart. There is nothing to do and nowhere to go. Accepting this, we can do everything and go everywhere. So